At my school's college fair, my teacher asked me, "Why are you here? You're not going anywhere." "Oh yeah? Why's that?" I kept writing my email address, trying not to let her see how much her words stung. "Because you're Asian. No school's gonna want you." She said it like she was stating a simple fact about the weather. The UCLA representative's pen stopped moving mid-sentence. She'd been writing down information for another student, but now she was staring at Mrs. Myers with her mouth slightly open. The other kid at the booth, a sophomore just browsing, took a step back like he didn't want to be associated with whatever was about to happen. "No school's going to want me because I'm Asian? Do you hear yourself?" I turned to face her, completely shocked. "I hear myself perfectly fine. Can you even see yourself?" She made a gesture at her eyes, mocking the racist stereotype. How creative. I turned back to the booth, hoping she'd just leave. My hand was shaking as I tried to finish writing my phone number. The pen skipped across the paper, leaving broken digits. The UCLA rep was frozen, like she couldn't believe a teacher would say this at her booth. Behind Mrs. Myers, I could see other students starting to notice the confrontation. Some had their phones out, probably already recording. The college fair was packed with juniors and seniors exploring their options. Tables lined the gym with representatives from schools all over California. Stanford's red banner hung next to UC Davis's blue and gold. The smell of cheap pizza from the concession stand mixed with too much Axe body spray. I'd been looking forward to this for weeks. My parents had both gone to community college, and I wanted to be the first in my family to go to a 4-year university. I had a 4.2 GPA and was president of the robotics club, but apparently none of that mattered to Mrs. Myers. She taught AP Chem and had always seemed to have it out for me. When I got the highest score on the midterm, she accused me of cheating, made me retake it in front of her during lunch while she watched my every move. When I got the same score, she just huffed and said the test must have been too easy. When I won the school's essay contest, she said I must have had help. Probably my tiger parents, she'd muttered just loud enough for me to hear. But this was a new low even for her, saying this stuff out loud at a college fair where actual admissions people could hear. Other teachers were starting to notice too. Mr. Rodriguez from the math department was frowning from across the gym. Miss Miller, the Mandarin teacher, looked horrified, but none of them moved to intervene. They just watched like this was some uncomfortable performance they had to sit through. I moved to the Berkeley table, trying to put distance between us. The representative smiled and handed me a brochure about their engineering program. She was a young black woman who looked like she'd probably dealt with her own share of discrimination. Her smile was encouraging, but her eyes kept flicking to Mrs. Myers, who had followed me. "Great programs for robotics," the rep said pointedly. "We'd love to see your application." I started writing my name on their mailing list when I felt a hand grab my arm. Mrs. Myers' fingers were like a vice around my bicep. Her acrylic nails pressed through my shirt and into my skin. The pen jerked across the paper, leaving a black line through the sign-up sheet. Mrs. Myers pulled me away from the table with surprising force. "How about we let the other students get a chance?" The Berkeley rep stood up. "Excuse me, he was in the middle of—" "I'm handling a disciplinary issue with my student," Mrs. Myers cut her off. "Please continue with others. What is your problem?" I yanked my arm free and didn't care that people were starting to stare. A crowd was forming now. Kids from my AP physics class. The volleyball team is still in their practice clothes. Even some parents who'd come to check out schools with their kids. Everyone's phones were definitely out now. Mrs. Myers' face was turning red, and a vein in her forehead was starting to throb. She leaned in close, and I could smell coffee on her breath mixed with something sour. Her voice dropped to a hiss meant just for me, but loud enough for others to catch pieces. "Your kind is always getting in the way of smart, bright white students. I'm not going to stand for it. Someone needs to speak up against you little diversity warriors." Her nails were digging into my skin through my shirt, deep crescents that would probably leave marks. I could feel warm drops where she'd broken skin. Behind her shoulder, I could see Richard Duncan waiting to talk to the Berkeley rep. He was white and had a 3.8 GPA. Solid, but not spectacular. Apparently, he was the kind of student Mrs. Myers thought deserved opportunities. The kind who wouldn't take spots from real Americans, as she'd once called them in class. "Get off me!" I pushed her hands away harder than I meant to. Mrs. Myers stumbled backward in her heels. The thin carpeting over the gym floor provided no traction. Her ankle twisted at an ugly angle, and she went down hard, landing on her hip. The crack when she hit was audible even over the general noise of the college fair. The sound she made was somewhere between a gasp and a scream. Paper brochures scattered around her like confetti. The entire college fair stopped to look at us. A circle formed, just like when kids fight in the hallway. "He hurt me." I repeat, "He hurt me." Security. "Colleges take notes, this student just hurt a teacher." She was practically shrieking from the floor. Her voice echoed off the gym walls. Every college representative in the building was staring. The Harvard table, MIT, every UC campus. All watching me standing over a fallen teacher. My future evaporating in real time. My heart dropped into my stomach. This was bad. Really bad. Pushing a teacher was grounds for expulsion. It didn't matter that she'd grabbed me first or said horrible racist things. All anyone saw was Mrs. Myers on the ground and me standing over her. The security guard rushed over along with Principal Castro. Mrs. Myers was holding her ankle and making these dramatic whimpering sounds. She kept pointing at me and telling everyone I'd attacked her unprovoked. that I'd gotten violent when she'd simply suggested I visit some safety schools. He assaulted me. This young man has anger issues. My legs wouldn't move as Mrs. Myers rolled on the gym floor clutching her ankle. Her shrieks bounced off the walls and ceiling, while dozens of phones stayed pointed at us, recording everything. Principal Castro pushed through the crowd and put his hand on my shoulder, pulling me backward. "Step back and don't say anything," he said quietly. The security guard bent down to help Mrs. Myers sit up against the Berkeley table. She kept screaming about assault while pointing at me with her finger shaking. The guard grabbed my elbow and started walking me toward the far corner of the gym, away from the crowd. Behind us, Mrs. Myers was getting louder, telling Principal Castro I'd attacked her for no reason. The nurse rushed in with her medical bag and knelt beside Mrs. Myers, checking her ankle. Castro started asking kids nearby what they'd seen, but Mrs. Myers kept yelling over everyone. "He's violent and dangerous," she shouted. More parents and students pushed closer to see what was happening. My stomach felt sick watching everyone stare at me like I was some kind of criminal. The Berkeley representative stepped around the growing crowd and walked straight to Principal Castro. She spoke quietly, but I could see her gesturing toward the table where it happened. Castro's eyebrows went up, and he started nodding as she talked. Mrs. Myers tried to interrupt, but the nurse was asking her to stay still for the ankle exam. The Berkeley rep kept talking and pointing at Mrs. Myers, then at me. Castro's face changed from angry to confused as he listened. The nurse came over to me with her bag while the security guard stayed close. "Let me see your arm," she said. I rolled up my sleeve and showed her the deep red marks from Mrs. Myers' nails. 4 crescents had broken through the skin with small drops of blood. The nurse took out her phone and started taking pictures from different angles. She pulled out antiseptic wipes and cleaned each mark carefully. "These are pretty deep," she said while writing notes on her clipboard. Principal Castro walked over and looked at my arm with his mouth tight. He pulled out his phone and made a call while the nurse put small bandages on the worst scratches. I heard him asking someone to come to the school right away. The security guard led me out of the gym through the side door while everyone watched. We walked down the empty hallway to the main office where Castro's secretary looked up surprised. The guard opened Castro's office door and told me to sit in the chair facing the desk. Through the window, I could see kids leaving the gym with their parents all talking and looking at their phones. Castro came in 20 minutes later and sat behind his desk, rubbing his forehead. He dialed a number and handed me the phone, saying my parents needed to hear this from me. My mom answered on the second ring, and I tried to explain what happened, but my voice kept cracking. She said they were leaving work immediately and would be there in 15 minutes. Castro took the phone back and talked to her in his serious principal voice about procedures and investigations. While we waited, he typed on his computer and made more phone calls to district people. My phone buzzed nonstop in my pocket, with texts and notifications, but I didn't look at any of them. When my parents arrived, my mom hugged me tight, while my dad asked Castro what would happen next. Castro explained there would be a full investigation, but until then, I was banned from all school events and activities. My chest got tight, thinking about the robotics competition on Saturday that we'd been preparing for all semester. He said it was standard procedure when there was an incident between a student and teacher. My parents argued that I was defending myself, but Castro said his hands were tied by district policy. We left through the front office while other kids stared through classroom door windows. At home, I finally checked my phone and saw hundreds of messages and tags on social media. Most of the videos started after I'd pushed Mrs. Myers, so it looked like I'd just attacked her. The comments were brutal, with people calling me violent and saying I should be expelled. My parents made me eat dinner even though I wasn't hungry and kept asking if I was okay. Around 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Joel Houston from my physics class. "Dude, I got the whole thing on video from start to finish," he wrote. He sent me a file that showed Mrs. Myers grabbing me first and even caught some of her racist comments. "Want me to post this or send it to Castro?" he asked. I saved the video to my phone and computer just to be safe. A few minutes later, Casey Nguyen messaged me on Instagram. "Hey, I write for the school paper and saw what happened. Can we talk about your side?" she asked. My parents were in the kitchen discussing whether we should get a lawyer. Mom thought we should stay quiet and let the school handle it, but Dad wanted to fight back publicly. I didn't know what to do, so I just didn't answer Casey yet. That night, I barely slept, thinking about how everyone at the school would look at me tomorrow. My phone kept lighting up with new messages and notifications that I couldn't bring myself to read. The next morning, I woke up to an email from the school counselor, Tiana Matthews. "I heard about yesterday's incident and want to check in with you," she wrote. "Please come see me during the first period for a mandatory meeting." She added that she was there to support me through whatever happened next. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived from the school with Principal Castro's name printed on the return address. My hands shook as I tore it open and pulled out 3 pages of official letterhead covered in small print. The first paragraph explained that a formal investigation had been opened regarding the incident at the college fair. The second paragraph listed everything I needed to do, including writing a detailed statement about what happened and attending a disciplinary hearing scheduled for next week. The language was cold and formal, like I'd already been found guilty of something terrible. My mom read it over my shoulder, and her face got tight with worry. She grabbed her phone and started texting my dad, who was still at work. While she was typing, I checked my phone and saw that Twitter was going crazy with videos from the college fair. Most of the clips started right when I pushed Mrs. Myers, so it looked like I'd just attacked her out of nowhere. The comments were brutal, with people calling me violent and dangerous and saying I should be expelled immediately. Someone had even made a TikTok with the video set to dramatic music that made me look like some kind of monster. My Instagram was flooded with messages from people I didn't even know calling me terrible names and saying I'd ruined a good teacher's career. I closed all my apps and opened my laptop instead to work on something productive. I pulled up Joel's complete video file and watched it again to make sure it showed everything clearly. The video started with Mrs. Myers making the racist eye gesture, and you could hear her saying that stuff about Asian students, not deserving spots at good schools. You could see her grab my arm first and her nails digging into my skin before I pushed her away. I attached the video to an email for Principal Castro, along with the photos the nurse had taken of the nail marks on my arm. Then, I spent 2 hours writing out a timeline of every single incident with Mrs. Myers since the beginning of the school year. The time she accused me of cheating on the midterm and made me retake it during lunch. The comment about tiger parents when I won the essay contest. Every little dig and racist remark she'd made in class. I included dates and which other students were there who might have heard things. My email to Castro ended up being 4 pages long with all the details. The next morning, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, but the caller ID said it was from the district office. A woman named Madison Rogers introduced herself as the investigator assigned to my case. Her voice was calm and professional, and she actually seemed to want to hear my side of things, which was different from how Castro had acted. She explained that I had rights during this process, including having a support person present during any meetings and getting copies of all the evidence being reviewed. She asked if I'd be willing to meet with her in person to go over everything, and I agreed to come in the next day. After I hung up, Casey Nguyen texted me again, asking if we could talk. She said she wasn't trying to write some sensational story, but wanted to look into the bigger picture of discrimination at our school. She'd already filed a public records request for any previous complaints about biased behavior from teachers, though she explained that names would be redacted for privacy. She was working on a piece about systemic issues in the district and thought my situation was part of a larger pattern. I told her I'd think about it and get back to her. A week passed with more meetings and paperwork and stress. Then Madison Rogers called me with an update that made me sit down hard on my bed. The investigation team had reviewed all the evidence, including Joel's video, and confirmed that it clearly showed Mrs. Myers making racist gestures and grabbing me first before I defended myself. She said this significantly changed how they were viewing the incident and that the focus was shifting from my actions to Mrs. Myers' behavior. She couldn't promise any specific outcome, but her tone was encouraging for the first time since this whole mess started. That same afternoon, an email went out to all students from the teachers' union with a subject line about defamation and legal consequences. The email warned that anyone who had posted videos or made public statements about the incident could face lawsuits for damaging a teacher's reputation. My parents read it and got worried that witnesses might get scared and not want to help anymore. But Joel texted me right away saying he wasn't backing down and that the union was just trying to intimidate people. He said the truth was the truth, and he'd already sent copies of his video to multiple people for safekeeping. Later that evening, I got an email that made me actually smile for the first time in days. The Berkeley representative had reached out directly to encourage me to still apply to their engineering program. She wrote that she'd witnessed what really happened and would be happy to include a note with my application explaining the circumstances. She said the admissions committee understood that sometimes good students end up in bad situations through no fault of their own. Her support felt like someone throwing me a rope when I was drowning. The next day, I had my meeting with Tiana Matthews in her small office next to the main counseling center. She had tissues on her desk and motivational posters on the walls, but she didn't treat me like I was fragile or broken. We spent an hour creating a plan for how I could keep up with my schoolwork while dealing with all this investigation stuff. She helped me understand that none of this was my fault and that standing up against racism was important, even when it was hard. She gave me worksheets for documenting everything properly and taught me how to organize all my evidence in a way that would be clear and convincing. That night at dinner, my parents had a big debate about what we should do next. My mom wanted to handle everything quietly through the official channels because she was worried about retaliation if we went public. My dad kept saying that sunshine was the best disinfectant and that keeping quiet just let people like Mrs. Myers get away with this stuff. They went back and forth while I pushed my rice around my plate, not really eating. Finally, they asked what I wanted to do, and I told them I just wanted this to be over so I could focus on college applications and robotics and being a normal senior. That night, my phone started buzzing with notifications from Instagram and Twitter, and even my old Facebook account that I barely used anymore. Anonymous accounts were sending me messages calling me a teacher attacker and saying I was trying to ruin a good woman's career just to get into college. Some messages had slurs and told me to go back where I came from. I took screenshots of everything and added them to the folder on my laptop where I was keeping all the evidence. The messages kept coming all night and into the next morning. I turned off notifications but kept checking and documenting because Tiana had told me to save everything. I sat at my desk with my laptop open and started typing up every single thing Mrs. Myers had done since the beginning of the school year. The cheating accusation after the midterm went first with the date and time, and the fact that Mr. Rodriguez had been in the hallway when she made me retake it. Then the essay contest incident where she said my parents must have helped me. The time she gave me a C on a lab report that was identical to Richard's A+ report, except for our names. The comment about tiger parents during the parent-teacher conference that my mom heard. Every snide remark an unfair grade and suspicious coincidence. By the time I finished, it was almost 4 in the morning, and I had 12 pages of incidents with dates and witnesses. The pattern was so obvious when you saw it all written out like that. Madison Rogers called the next afternoon to schedule our formal interview at the district office. Tiana picked me up from the school early and drove me there in her beat-up Honda Civic that smelled like vanilla air freshener. The district building was all glass and concrete with motivational posters in the lobby about excellence and diversity. Madison's office was small but neat, with a recorder on the desk and legal pads everywhere. She asked me to start from the beginning and tell her everything about my interactions with Mrs. Myers. Tiana sat next to me, taking her own notes and occasionally reminding me about details I was forgetting. Madison asked specific questions about dates and times and who else was present. She wanted to know exactly what Mrs. Myers said and did at the college fair. She asked about my grades in her class compared to other classes. She wrote down every name I mentioned as a potential witness. The whole interview took almost 3 hours. Madison told us she'd be interviewing other people over the next few days and that I should keep documenting any new incidents. The next week felt like forever, as Madison interviewed everyone who'd been at the college fair. Joel texted me after his interview saying he'd shown her the whole video and she'd watched it 3 times taking notes. The Berkeley rep had given a statement over the phone about what she saw and heard. Even some teachers who'd been in the gym agreed to talk to Madison about what they witnessed. Casey published an article in the school paper about discrimination policies and investigation procedures without mentioning any names, but everyone knew what it was about. The article explained how the district was supposed to handle bias complaints and what evidence was needed for different outcomes. She included statistics about discrimination cases in our district over the past 5 years. The comment section online turned into a war between people defending Mrs. Myers and people supporting me. The school resource officer pulled me out of calculus to take my statement in his little office by the main entrance. Officer Delgado typed while I talked and asked a few basic questions about the physical contact. He looked at the photos of my arm and made copies for his file. He told me that based on the evidence, it seemed like self-defense and mutual combat at worst, so criminal charges were unlikely for either of us. Part of me was mad that Mrs. Myers wasn't getting arrested for assault, but mostly I was just relieved I wasn't going to end up with a record. My parents had been making calls all week and finally found an attorney who specialized in education law and discrimination cases. Vikram Anderson's office was in a strip mall between a Thai restaurant and a tax place, but his walls were covered with diplomas and awards. He reviewed all my documentation and watched Joel's video and looked at the screenshots of the anonymous messages. He said we had a strong case if the district didn't handle this properly and that Title VI violations were serious business. He drafted a letter to the district that afternoon demanding they preserve all evidence, including emails and security footage, and warning them about destroying anything. He told me to stay off social media completely and let him handle any communication with the district or media. He said one wrong post could hurt our case. The letter must have worked because 2 days later, the district announced that Mrs. Myers was placed on paid administrative leave pending the investigation. The substitute who took over AP Chem was this young guy fresh out of his teaching credential program who seemed nervous about the whole situation. Teachers were whispering in the hallways about it, and you could tell who supported Mrs. Myers by how they looked at me. Miss Miller smiled at me in the hallway, but Mr. Peterson from the English department turned and walked the other way when he saw me coming. Then another video showed up on the school's anonymous confession page, shot from behind the Stanford table. This angle showed Mrs. Myers' hand wrapped around my arm and her nails digging in before I pushed her away. You could even see the red marks on my skin when she let go. The video had already been shared hundreds of times before lunch, and even some kids who'd been calling me violent started saying maybe there was more to the story. Principal Castro called me into his office the next morning and told me he was lifting my event ban effective immediately. He pushed a paper across his desk, showing that a substitute would be covering AP Chemistry for the rest of the year. My hands shook a little as I signed the acknowledgement form. The robotics competition was this Saturday, and I could actually go now. Walking back into school felt weird with everyone staring and whispering. Some kids nodded at me in support while others turned away. I headed straight to the robotics lab where my teammates were already working on our robot's arm mechanism. They all stopped what they were doing when I walked in. Jake put down his soldering iron and said they never doubted my side of the story. The others gathered around showing me the improvements they'd made to our code while I was banned. We spent the rest of the week preparing with this new energy and focus. Everyone stayed late calibrating sensors and running test programs. That Thursday night, my parents drove me to the district's college information session at the community center. The room was packed with juniors and their families, looking at display boards and collecting brochures. An admissions counselor from UC San Diego was giving a presentation about application requirements. She mentioned that students could include an addendum to explain special circumstances. After her talk, I approached her and briefly explained my situation. She assured me colleges understand context and that documented incidents wouldn't automatically hurt my chances. She gave me her card and told me to email her directly if I needed help. Meanwhile, Casey had been busy with her public records request to the district. She texted me Friday afternoon saying the documents came through. We met at the library where she spread out 3 separate complaint files about Mrs. Myers. One from 2019 where a Latino student said she graded him unfairly. Another from 2021 where a black parent complained about comments she made during conferences. The third from earlier this year about her telling an Indian student they should consider trade school instead. None of the complaints were sustained, and all 3 families eventually transferred to different schools. The pattern was obvious, but the district had protected her each time. The school board meeting that Tuesday was standing room only. Community members signed up for public comment with strong opinions on both sides. I sat in the back row between my parents trying to stay invisible. A white woman said Mrs. Myers was an excellent teacher being unfairly targeted. An Asian dad said the district needed to address its racism problem. A black mom demanded accountability for all the previous complaints. The board members just sat there taking notes without responding. Our community was completely divided, and it showed. After the meeting, Casey introduced me to someone she'd contacted through her journalism connections. He was an alumnus from 2015 who dealt with a discriminatory coach and now worked as a civil rights attorney in Sacramento. We met at a coffee shop where he helped me refine my written statement over 2 hours. He explained what details mattered legally and what could hurt my case. He rewrote sections to be more precise and factual without emotional language. The district scheduled a mediation session for the following Monday at their administrative building. Vikram met us there along with Mrs. Myers and her union lawyer. She sat across from me in a gray suit looking straight ahead. Her lawyer claimed she was just maintaining high academic standards for all students. He said her comments were taken out of context and that she never showed bias. The mediator tried to find middle ground, but Mrs. Myers wouldn't even acknowledge what she'd said. The meeting ended after 90 minutes with no resolution. Vikram wasn't surprised and told me not to let it break my spirit. That afternoon, he filed a formal hostile environment complaint with the district, demanding they create a safety plan for me. He included all the video evidence and witness statements showing the pattern of discrimination. He told them they couldn't sweep this under the rug or make me the problem. The district had 5 days to respond with concrete steps to ensure my safety at the school. Vikram also started preparing our Title VI complaint for the Office for Civil Rights. He warned me these federal investigations take months or even years to complete. We filed it that Friday with dozens of pages of documentation. Justice was going to be a marathon, not a sprint. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather for the robotics competition at the convention center. Our team loaded the robot into Jake's dad's van and drove down together. The venue was huge with teams from all over the state setting up in their pit areas. We had 6 qualifying matches to prove ourselves for the elimination rounds. Our robot performed better than it ever had in practice. The arm mechanism worked perfectly, and our autonomous program scored maximum points. We made it to semifinals where we faced the defending champions. The match was close, but we lost by just 12 points. Still, we'd earned 2nd place overall out of 48 teams. My teammates made sure I was in every celebration photo and team picture. For those few hours, I remembered what it felt like to just be a normal student. Again. Not the kid who pushed a teacher or the center of a discrimination case, just a robotics team member celebrating with my friends. Monday morning, I walked to my locker feeling pretty good about the weekend competition. The hallway was busy with kids rushing to first period. I spun my combination lock and pulled the door open. A folded piece of paper fell out and landed at my feet. I picked it up and unfolded it carefully. Someone had written a racial slur in black marker across the middle of the page. My hands started shaking as I stared at the ugly word. I looked around to see if anyone was watching, but everyone was just going about their normal morning. I took out my phone and snapped 3 pictures from different angles. The handwriting looked rushed and angry, with the marker pressing hard into the paper. I folded it back up and walked straight to Tiana's office. She was at her desk typing on her computer when I knocked. I showed her the note and watched her face go from confused to angry to worried in about 2 seconds. She took photos with her own phone and then put the note in a plastic bag from her desk drawer. We sat down and filled out a bias incident report together, adding every detail we could remember. She asked me if I had any idea who might have done it, but I honestly didn't know. Too many people had picked sides in this whole mess. The report went into my growing file of evidence that now took up half a drawer in her filing cabinet. That afternoon, I sat at my computer working on my college application addendum. I kept it simple and factual, just listing the dates and basic facts of what happened. No emotions or opinions, just the timeline of events. I referenced the video evidence and witness statements without going into detail. The whole thing was only 2 paragraphs, but it took me 3 hours to get the wording right. I emailed it to Vikram for review before submitting anything. He called me 20 minutes later and we went through it line by line. He suggested removing one sentence that might sound too defensive and adding a line about my continued academic performance. We made the changes together and he approved the final version. I saved it in 3 different places, just to be safe. Wednesday morning, Madison called my mom's phone asking if we could meet that afternoon. She said she'd completed all her interviews and would be making her recommendation to the district soon. My stomach twisted into knots as we drove to the district office. Madison met us in the same conference room where this whole investigation started. She had a thick folder on the table but kept it closed while she talked. She explained that she'd interviewed 23 people, including students, teachers, and the college reps. She'd reviewed all the video evidence and documentation we'd provided. Her tone was professional, but I caught something in her eyes that made me think things were going in my favor. She couldn't tell us her exact recommendation yet, but said the evidence was very clear about what happened. The waiting was killing me, but at least it sounded like someone finally believed me. 2 days later, the district scheduled a fact-finding meeting for the following Tuesday. The email said all evidence would be reviewed with attorneys present from both sides. My parents hired Vikram to represent me officially at the meeting. We spent the weekend preparing, going over every piece of evidence, and practicing potential questions. Vikram created a timeline on poster board showing every incident with Mrs. Myers dating back to September. He organized witness statements in a binder with tabs for easy reference. The meeting was held in the district boardroom with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. Mrs. Myers sat on one side with her union lawyer, and I sat on the other with Vikram and my parents. Madison presented her findings to a panel of 3 district administrators. She went through everything systematically, starting with Mrs. Myers' history of complaints against her. Then she showed the videos from multiple angles, clearly showing Mrs. Myers grabbing me first. She read witness statements from the Berkeley rep and other students who heard the racist comments. Vikram stood up and walked the panel through our evidence piece by piece. He showed the photos of my arm with the nail marks and broken skin. He presented the pattern of discrimination with specific examples and dates. He explained how my push was a defensive reaction to being physically assaulted by a teacher. The union lawyer tried to argue that I used excessive force, but Vikram shut that down quickly. He pointed out that Mrs. Myers outweighed me by at least 40 pounds and had grabbed me hard enough to break skin. He showed frame-by-frame video, proving I only pushed her hands away, not her body directly. The panel asked questions for another hour before calling a recess. We waited in the hallway while they deliberated behind closed doors. My dad paced back and forth while my mom held my hand. Vikram stayed calm, reviewing his notes and preparing for whatever came next. After 90 minutes, they called us back in. The lead administrator read from a prepared statement saying the district found my push was defensive and justified given the circumstances. They were officially withdrawing any disciplinary action against me, effective immediately. Relief washed over me so hard I almost started crying right there in the boardroom. But the administrator kept reading, and the next part was even better. They found Mrs. Myers had violated multiple district policies, including physical contact with a student and discriminatory behavior. They recommended mandatory bias training and formal disciplinary action to be determined by the superintendent. The union lawyer immediately said they would appeal, but at least there was finally some accountability. The news spread through school and the community within hours. Some kids came up to me in the hallway apologizing for believing Mrs. Myers' version. Others walked past me muttering about how I'd ruined a good teacher's career. Parents argued about it on the school Facebook page, with some saying justice was served and others claiming the district caved to political correctness. I learned pretty quick that documented evidence doesn't change some people's minds. They'd already decided what they wanted to believe, and nothing would convince them otherwise. A week later, the police called to say they were closing their investigation without filing charges against either of us. The officer said there wasn't enough for criminal assault charges in either direction given the circumstances. Part of me wanted Mrs. Myers charged for attacking me, but mostly I was just glad that part was over. Principal Castro called me into his office the next morning with a different energy than before. He said he was creating a student staff working group to improve how the school handles bias incidents. He wanted better reporting procedures and actual consequences for discrimination. He asked if I'd be willing to join as a student representative. I thought about it for a minute, weighing whether I wanted to stay involved in this mess. But maybe some real change could come from everything that happened, so I agreed to join. The first meeting would be in 2 weeks, with 5 students and 5 teachers working together. That Friday, I got an email from the Berkeley representative who'd witnessed everything at the college fair. She encouraged me to apply and said she'd been impressed by how I'd handled such a difficult situation. She couldn't make any promises, but hinted that my response to adversity had actually strengthened my application. An hour later, the UCLA rep sent a similar message saying she'd be happy to write a note for my file about what she'd observed. My college dreams suddenly felt possible again after weeks of thinking they were completely destroyed. Tiana called me into her office that Monday and slid a business card across the desk for a therapist who worked with students dealing with racial trauma. I took the card and made an appointment for that Thursday after school. The therapist's office was in a small building near the mall with plants everywhere and soft lighting that made me feel less nervous about being there. She asked me to describe what happened, and I found myself talking for almost the whole hour about not just the college fair, but all the other times too. The way my chest would get tight walking into AP Chem, knowing Mrs. Myers would find something wrong with my work. How I'd started recording her classes on my phone just in case she said something racist again. The therapist taught me breathing exercises and gave me worksheets about recognizing stress symptoms in my body. Walking back to AP Chemistry 2 days later felt weird with the substitute teacher, Mr. Franklin, standing where Mrs. Myers used to be. He was younger and smiled when I walked in, which already made the room feel different. Some kids I barely knew nodded at me or moved their backpacks so I could sit near them. Sarah from my lab group whispered that she never believed what Mrs. Myers said about me being violent. During lunch, Casey showed me the email from the Office for Civil Rights, saying they'd received our complaint and would investigate within the next 12 months. A whole year seemed forever, but Vikram had warned me these things moved slowly through government systems. That afternoon at robotics practice, Coach Anderson announced we'd qualified for the state championship based on our regional scores. Everyone cheered and started talking about what modifications we needed to make to our robot's arm mechanism. I threw myself into redesigning the grip strength calculations and testing different servo motors. Working on something I was good at reminded me I was more than just the kid who pushed a teacher. The district sent out an email that Friday announcing mandatory anti-bias training for all staff starting next month. They were also launching an anonymous reporting system where students could report discrimination without giving their names. Madison called to tell me this was partly because of our case, though they couldn't say that publicly. I spent that weekend working on my college applications with my parents, helping me proofread everything. My dad stayed up late helping me format my robotics portfolio, while my mom made sure I had all my transcripts ready. I wrote thank you emails to the Berkeley rep and the UCLA rep who'd supported me. The Berkeley rep wrote back immediately saying she was glad to help and looked forward to reading my application. I added notes to Joel and Casey and even Mr. Rodriguez, who'd finally spoken up during the investigation. Submitting each application felt like dropping a heavy rock I'd been carrying for weeks. Someone at the school told me Mrs. Myers was still on leave while her union fought the district's disciplinary action. Part of me wanted to know if she'd ever come back, but I decided to stop checking the school board meeting minutes. She'd probably get reassigned to another school if she won her appeal, but that wasn't my problem anymore. 2 weeks before winter break, I got home to find a thick envelope from Cal State LA sitting on the kitchen counter. My hands shook as I opened it and read the acceptance letter offering me a spot in their engineering program. They were also offering a merit scholarship that would cover most of my tuition based on my grades and test scores. I sat at the kitchen table reading it over and over until my mom came home and started crying happy tears. That night, I actually slept through until morning, without waking up anxious for the first time since October. My parents took me out for Korean BBQ to celebrate, and my dad kept telling the waiter his son was going to be an engineer. The scholarship meant I wouldn't have to take out huge loans, even if the other schools didn't work out. Having one solid option made everything else feel less scary and more like exciting possibilities instead of desperate needs. Well, folks, that's it from me today. Thanks for sticking with me and letting me throw my thoughts and questions out there along the way. I really appreciate it. Like the video, it helps more than you think.